Please, Lars and Tone, come and sit down. Lars, you're still young. I'm still impolite. And therefore, I will also raise the first question. The term school effectiveness plays quite a big role in the new center that Lars is leader of. Gert, do you see this term as a sort of threat to professional judgment?
Yeah, why not? So, yeah, I have concerns because these are all, seductive terms. It's very difficult, for example, to say schools should not be effective. So there are these words hovering in education. I call them non-objectionables, like quality. No one is against quality, but the real discussion is what is quality? No one wants education to be ineffective. But then the question is, what does that mean? What is it for? And what is the price to make something happen? And that's where I think the notion of effectiveness is too simplistic. So before you know it, it's hiding quite a lot.
Okay. So perhaps we should erase the term, Lars, from the new center. You're not allowed to answer this. We have a question down here. Please say your name and where you're from.
Thank you. Sorry. My name is Mette Ebbesen, and I am an associate professor of ethics at Aarhus University. And I'm teaching molecular biologists to research in an ethical, responsible way. However, in my spare time, I have a full-time position educating or teaching in elementary school in Aarhus, because I really like teaching. So my daily practice is not only academic research, it's also to be a teacher in the elementary school. And teaching ethics, I think we should go one step further or one step deeper in philosophy and ethics than mentioned in both in the speeches we have had here today. Gert, I really like your picture comparing the teacher's role with the physician, and you said that physicians, they have a shared goal of promoting health, and basically that is to promote beneficence of patients. However, I do not think that it is that simple. I think you have to go deeper into what is it to promote health, and I think the two philosophers in Georgetown in the US, they have Tom Beechamp and James Childress, they have a very good suggestion that you can base the professional judgment of physicians on 4 basic ethical principles, which is shared in all cultures, and that is beneficence, non-maleficence, which means not harming, just sharing of health-promoting treatments, and respect for autonomy of the patient. And these 4 basic ethical principles, I think that you can also use them as a base for professional judgment of teachers. Actually, I use these 4 ethical principles as my base in elementary school in Aarhus. And that is my suggestion for a philosophical model of basing the professional judgment of teachers.
Okay, thank you. Rather a comment than a question, I think. Do you want to comment on that?
Well, yeah, it's a big discussion, so thanks for adding that layer. Maybe the quick response, but it's difficult. I would say that even if, say, teachers act ethically in relation to their students, that is not already also to say that they're acting educationally. So I think the question behind sort of the ethical quality is still the purpose or the telos of the practice. That's why just to say teaching is an ethical profession is not enough, because teaching also has to be an educational profession. That's a discussion in relation to ethics. But we don't want teaching to be unethical or aethical or non-ethical.
Thank you. Another question?
Yeah, thank you for trying to grasp a very difficult subject. I'm a mathematician, and I used to teach math. Now I'm a head of a research center at VIA University College in Aarhus. I'd like each of you, as you come from 3 different countries, to point out one single issue to teacher education which you find lacking at the moment in your countries. Just a short suggestion, please.
Will you start, Tone?
No, I will not start. I think I need a few moments to think about that, so I'll leave that to these two. Yeah.
Lars, you go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I don't need to. I don't need to think. I'm just speaking.
Use your instinct.
Well, first of all, while having the possibility to actually say something, I would just comment on the question of school effectiveness, because that's part of sort of the background for our center. Yes, of course, it's a problematic concept, a concept that you have to discuss. But also, being a teacher, you have aims, you have objectives, you have things you want to do. So it's also a concept that is unavoidable. It's problematic, but it's also unavoidable. You always have to discuss what do we understand by school effectiveness. I don't think you can avoid that. Defining what is more effective, what is more, what do we aim at? That's a basic discussion. So I understand the problem, but you can't avoid to discuss it. And actually, you did it yourself in your presentation. What we lack in teacher education today is
actually you were not allowed to comment on that. Now about teacher education,
I think my concept of the important concept, I think, of professional learning communities, the way teachers work together. I think that much of what we are discussing today, practicing professional judgment, is not a thing that is happening in a single classroom with a single teacher, but is something which is justified and developed and qualified in the relationship between teachers. So one suggestion is to give more support to actually practice the act of the professional learning community practices in teacher education, to work together simply in a justified and well educated, well supported way, also based on research evidence.
Thank you. Tone,
yeah.
Have you been able to reconsider?
Yes, I have. I have to make it clear that I'm not a teacher educator, and I'm not in teacher education. So any Norwegian colleagues who hear this might be deeply offended. So well, okay, here it goes. From my vantage point, it does seem that because we are now in Norway in the process of institutionalizing a master degree in teacher education, so we increase from 3 years to 5 years. And the pedagogy part of teacher education, educational theory, is under considerable threat. Subject content is growing quite a lot at the expense of pedagogy. And this seems to me to be a problem. And it hangs together, if I might say this too, this is a different sort of problem, but they hang together. It hangs together with the fact that the Norwegian national curriculum, because we have a national curriculum, is very much focused on student achievement, like Gert said, measurable competencies. These two things hang together, the competencies and the subject content becoming more important than educational theory.
Thank you. Gert, just a short remark, please.
Yes. It's a provocative question, but I do want to say, because you did that as well, I think the question of effectiveness, or the question of what works, is exactly the question of the teacher and of teaching. And my concern is what happens when that question sort of rises up to research. And I think it then becomes another question, and the danger is that it then becomes to redefine the work of the teacher. That's sort of my main point. But I thought the 3 presentations are a brilliant sort of set of the politics and the analytics and the practice, so that was good. What is lacking in teacher education? I find the language of teacher education quite poor. So I would just respond by saying what I would like to add is sort of a sense that education has to do with opening the soul of the child towards the world. That's what I would like to see happening in teacher education as well.
Thank you. Now we have 4 questions, so please, short questions, and please address them to one of the 3 keynotes, and short answers, please.
Peter Allerup from DPU. I have 2 questions or comments. The first is to you, Gert. You mentioned as an objective that the quality of should be equal all over. And to me, it seems that you, by this, have a wish to remove all dynamics of the system, which of course, I would regret as a statistician, because we live from diversity. So are you really just referring to the framework, or are you going deeper? That was the first question. The other one is to Toge. I really don't really get your evidence definition, because how do you treat all the kinds of evidence used in mathematics? There is no judgment at all. Absolutely no judgment. Sure. Most of the sentences, mathematical sentences, can be proved according to a theoretical framework. So are you omitting this, or where are the limit between what is obviously something that can be judged in our educational world and this mathematical setup?
We get the picture. Gert, would you start?
Yeah,
this?
so the social justice argument, I think if I phrase it as saying everyone should have the right to the same quality of education, so everyone has a right to good education. And I didn't want to say by that everyone should have identical education. So the question, what does it mean to get good education, becomes a very complicated question. Just as you say, medicine should promote health, but that's where the trouble starts. So I'm not saying we make the provision of education identical, on the contrary, but I am saying the social justice argument that lies behind all these efforts that we're now in remains a very important argument. The real questions are questions about definition and questions about operationalization. And I'm sort of saying some of the operationalization begins to work against, despite the good intentions. That's sort of my concern. But I'm not saying one size fits all.
Thank you. Tone,
yeah.
about...
Yeah, I'm quite happy to concede that different kinds of evidence play different roles in different disciplines. And that in mathematics, which is not my field at all, so I wouldn't claim to know anything about it. In mathematics, you can have proof. I am not entirely convinced that they require no judgment at all. But perhaps a smaller role for judgment than elsewhere. Sure, why not?
Thank you. And we have a question down here. We wait with you, Kristen. You be allowed to have a workshop later, so we skip you.
Thank you. My name is Carsten. I'm an associate professor, an assistant professor here at DPU. My question is quite simple. What exactly do each of you understand by professional judgment? Because looking at Tone's conclusion, I think all of you might agree to most of what it actually says there. But I'm pretty sure you don't agree on what professional judgment is. So could you, like, a 2-sentence answer? I know that's impossible, but still.
2 sentences. Please. Lars, go ahead.
Well, I tried sort of to sum it up in this triangle that performing professional judgment, you have sort of 3 dimensions, I think, which are important. The normative, or what you aim at, that's part of the profession. It's a very important part of the profession. What are you aiming at? Why are you actually teaching as a teacher? Secondly, the experience, the collaboration with your colleagues, the practice, and thirdly, the role of formal knowledge provided by research and by other sources. You know, to put that together is actually to practice professional judgment.
Thank you.
Can I briefly comment on that? Yeah. There is something difficult about, very often there's something very difficult about asking what something is, because that sort of suggests that you think there is one once and for all definition of what something is. And that simply is not the case, I don't think. This is, judgment is a many-faceted concept. It has many dimensions, and it's usually many things. And I would prefer to keep it a bit loose and not to get married to one particular understanding or definition of the term. One has to be, these are the sorts of terms that one really needs to be a bit flexible about, I think. But you can stipulate the definition in the context that you are working with, because then you can say, in this context, I am going to understand judgments as being this and this and this and this.
Thank you. We have time for one final question. Yes.
Shall I do my very short?
You're allowed to.
So, because I think it's very easy, I would say it's to come to a conclusion about what is educationally desirable in meeting a concrete and unique situation.
Okay. That's beautiful. Beautiful. The last question, please. Hopefully short and precise.
That's me. Hello, I'm Heidi Lykke-Nissen from UCC. Gert, thank you very much. Could you please elaborate or tell me where I could read more about? It sounds like that the government of Holland actually are reading your books, actually are taking what you say into account. And I think that would be very inspiring to get an idea of how is that possible to make governments actually listen to what people like you are saying. Thank you.
I don't know how that's possible. B, it's also quite dangerous, so we also always should be very careful. I was in a meeting with the minister who actually was able to quote my work and say, isn't it about qualification socialization? And then this third word always remains very difficult. But there is a colleague of mine who, for example, when looking at those 3 terms and thinking about education that way, so he's not saying, oh, Biesta has developed a theory and he has managed to push it through, but he's saying what's helpful there is that it gives language to something that a lot of people sort of feel but struggle with to get. And he says the interesting contribution is that language seems to allow to express something, so it comes at the right time. That's as far as I would want to go, but I always believe people should think for themselves, so if they start quoting, before you know it, there's something wrong. So.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we don't have time for any final remarks. I'm not a trained moderator. I'm sorry. I just want to thank you for your contributions, the questions from you, and the presentations and the debate. Thank you very much.